G'day guys, welcome back to SuperCoach with DR and welcome to the round 11 review. Look, a pretty nice round for me. Have moved up in the rankings now inside the top 500, 459 as an overall rank. So really pleased with that. I wasn't expecting that this early. It was probably a goal by the end of the season. So the key is now to try to maintain this ranking and hopefully even move up a little bit further. But at this stage of the season, really stoked with that. But as we know, we do have the dreaded buys coming up. I'm not looking too bad this round, but round 13, round 14 is looking a little bit dicey at the moment and may need to make some moves on the run. But I will talk about my buy plans or my short-term buy plans. It's really hard to predict because things could change within the next week, but I will talk about that. I'll talk about the trades that I did make this week. Really happy with those in the end because I was tossing and turning between a couple of different moves and it was a really tough week in order to know exactly what to do. So I think I made an okay move there in regards to that, and I'll tell you what, like the weekend really couldn't have got much better for me because my boys at Brisbane Lions really took care of the Giants. We wore the old Fitzroy jumper as part of the Indigenous Guernsey this weekend, designed by Chrissy Johnson, one of my favourite players. So absolutely stoked, and had Zorko in that game as my only Lions man in SuperCoach, and didn't he deliver? So fantastic from Captain Dane. Yeah, as I said, this week was a really, really positive week for me. But as I say a lot of the time, this thing is a marathon, not a sprint. We do have the buys coming up, and I do say this a lot also, I am not counting all my chickens yet. But let's check out the side, and I'll talk about a few of my plans going into the future. So for the first time in a few weeks, my defensive line didn't actually let me down, and there are a few shining lights. None brighter than the Seagull Jake Lloyd. Look, I didn't think that this man had it in him anymore. A lovely 142. Remember last year, he only went under the ton once, which was in round 1. And the last 3 weeks, he's failed to reach 100. So this was a big fight back from the great man. Got his serving of large chips. And I did mention last week as well that I'm still not disappointed as Lloyd is a starting pick because he's still been one of the best defenders this year that we've had to choose from. But at the end of the day, he is the Seagull and nothing's going to change. Dawson did try to take that role last week, but Lloyd said, no, I am the main man. I'm going to get this large chunk of points this week. So super stoked from the Seagull. And if you don't have him, I've said it basically all year, he's going to be a good selection. Tommy Stewart, 119. Again, super stoked with this bloke after a quieter, I suppose, last 3 weeks. He was looking like he was going to be the number 1 defender in the game. What was in about round 7, round 8, but he's sort of slowed down a little bit, which has been frustrating, but he hasn't been playing terribly. But a 119 really rewarded owners, but he faced a buy this week. But it's not a bad buy to have, obviously, this week, and we'll talk about the buys a little bit later. Short, he bounced back, so really disappointing week from him. It's been a pretty disappointing season overall from Shorty, but anything over the ton, I'm going to be happy with, and 106, beautiful from him. I think he was on over 40 points at quarter time, so it did slow up in the last 3, but that goes to show the importance of having a really fast start. If you can do that, then you should manage to at least go close to the ton, I think. So right on from Shorty, wrap with that. Ridley, so this was the bad score that I did get in my defensive line this week. I was sort of just waiting for him to get going, but it just didn't happen. It was an okay type of first quarter. I think he was on about 20 to 24 points, but as I said, just didn't ever get going, and there are a few good players around him. Dyson Heppel played a really, really solid game, so I think he stole some points. As you know, Redmond's back there. Look, I'm a little bit worried about Ridley. I still think that he finishes in the top 8 to top 10 defenders for us this year, but it's nothing like we were hoping at the start. Ever since that concussion, things have just gone downhill. But remember, the last couple of weeks he has given us a 105 plus, so that's really, really positive, and I can forgive him maybe one more time. But Jordan, come on, mate. We need 100 plus scores from you each and every week. Stephen May, so again, this isn't a bad score. I'm going to take a 90 at this stage from Stephen May. We've seen a 72, I think it was, last week that I was really disappointed with. And look, he's a type of bloke that starts really, really well and then tapers off, but he actually had a really solid last quarter, which was good to see. So Stephen May, yeah, okay with a 90. This man I was absolutely wrapped with. So Lockie Jones, you just love having this guy playing his side. Geez, he goes hard at it, follows up really well also. If he was coming straight at you, he runs like a freight train. He's a really solid man. He's a big, big man. So I'd be getting out of the way pretty quickly, I think, if Lockie was coming at me like a freight train. But a score of 80, this is exactly what we need. Not only did I have him on field, but this is fantastic for his cash gen. Now, he's going to miss this week. If Highmore and Murphy are lucky enough to play, that means that I'm still full in my defensive line for this week, which is really handy. And then he's going to be brilliant cover. So certainly entrenched himself in the best 22 at Port now. A fan favourite, now a favourite of mine without a doubt. So I'm just rapt to be able to have him on field. So obviously this week won't be able to have him on field. We'll hopefully get cover, fingers crossed. But when it comes to the rookie roulette, I sort of did win that this week in the defensive line. But again, you do need to make your own decisions. I backed Jones in to get the highest score, and that came to fruition in the end. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I certainly won this week. Highmore, really disappointing with a 36. When he was named at centre-half back, there was a temptation to field him because I had to make a decision. 1 out of the 3. I didn't have a loophole this week. So, yeah, I was tempted, but just not sold with Highmore in the end. And Lockie Murphy, well, you can see there I had him as the emergency. That sort of represented, I suppose, the fact that he was my second most favourable option there. 48, nothing fantastic. I was expecting or hoping 60 plus type scores from Murph, so hopefully he can A, stay in the side, and then B, hit a 60 plus type score next week. Into the midfield, you can see here that I do have a new addition, and he was my vice captain. I'll get to him in a minute, but Clary Oliver, a 139, followed up from a 204 last week. Absolutely stoked. He's going to now be over, what is he now? 693k. He'll be over 700k by the end of next week. So absolutely stoked to have this bloke on my side. He has been in there since round 1. If you look at my pre-season videos, he was one of my absolute locks, just a non-negotiable for me. And he's just on fire at the moment, Clary. So if you don't have him, yeah, it's costing you, I think, at this stage. He's just one of those guys that just never gives up, just gives 100%, keeps on going, that contested pill. He's just a master, with the pressure that he puts on. Has improved his disposal a little bit also, and he's just getting so much of it. So he's just a great guy to have in your side at the moment, and was very close to putting him as my vice captain this week. Obviously, you can see that I got the man next to him, Jack McRae, not only in my side this week, but did have him as my vice captain on debut. So wrapped with that 145. There was a few options because I had McRae, Oliver, Gawn as well. Either way, I thought they're going to get a pretty nice score here, but I did go with my gut and go with McRae, so that also did give me a few bonus points there. Clary would have been probably my second best option after McRae, but look, what do I say about this man on debut? It's been really, really tough betting against him every week, and as you can see in my bank, only 7k left, but I thought it was worth each and every penny getting Jack McRae in, because he's come off a really nice score last week, but the three weeks prior to that, there were his 3 lowest scores of the year. So I sort of thought to myself, look, it's now or never. He's one of those non-negotiable picks that you must have in your side. I was 52% of coaches that didn't have him, so I'm rapt to be in the, I wouldn't call it majority, sort of it's about 50-50, the ownership with McRae at the moment, but all the good sides have him, so absolutely stoked to have him in now. He's just one of those picks that's going to be reliable each and every week, does not go under the ton, and just doesn't get tagged. I can't understand why they don't tag Jack McRae. I suppose we go to Bond, but again, they weren't putting a really hard tag on Bond either. So, yeah, I've said it about 3 or 4 times now. Just stoked to have this man in my side. I think I'll leave it there with Jack McRae. Talk about having, being stoked to have a player in his side. Dane Zorko, I jumped on right at the ideal time. He's given me a 117 last week on debut and followed up with his biggest score of the year, a 162. So I've got 2 of his highest 3 scores of the year in the last 2 weeks as an owner, and that is absolutely fantastic. That's how you really jump, up the ranks. You need to jump on at the right time, and I suppose it was a little bit of luck because I didn't love the selection at the time. I just didn't have the money to be able to go up to an Uber Premium. I probably would have selected Jared Lyons, but in the end, I went with someone that had DPP. I'm looking to eventually switch him into the forward line. I'll probably do that in 2 weeks. That's the plan anyway, to get him back up there. That will allow me another spot in my midfield to upgrade to another Uber if I've got the cash, fingers crossed. But he just dominated Zorko, who was on about 90 points at half-time. Basically, every one of his disposals was effective, hit the scoreboard, the pressure king. If you look at him at the moment, I was a little bit worried about his durability after last year with his Achilles and his calf issues. But if you look at him closely, he's just looking 100% at the moment. And look, no player going around in the AFL is running at 100% at the moment. It's just not realistic. Even I think the healthiest players are probably going at 90 to 95 if you're lucky at this stage of the season. And I think that's why they allow the teams to have a bye at this stage as well, because bodies are sore. Players do need a little bit of a rest. But Zorko's just been pumping it out, just clearly best on ground over the weekend in that match, and a really, really happy owner. He's going to get close to 600k, 579 at the moment. So, yep, absolutely wrapped with our captain. Sammy Walsh had a really nice first quarter. It was looking like a nice 130 type score, but really slowed up in the end and only delivered a 90. So, really disappointing second half from him last week, and really disappointing, I suppose, quarter 2 to 4 from him this week. But we'll forgive him with a 90. I still think he'll be in the top 10 averaging midfielders by the end of the season. Rory Laird, so I've got a decision on my hands. Do I keep him in my midfield for the remainder of the season at M8? I think that I will, actually, because Lachie Whitfield at the moment is really, really tempting. I've got a little bit of a plan up my sleeve to possibly get him in to my back line in a couple of weeks. So I might talk about that a little bit later, or even next week. We'll see. But Laird, 92, I'm okay with that, because the last 3 weeks he's gone some nice 120 plus type scores. So yeah, it's not what you want from Laird, but again, if it's one of his lowest scores and it's a 90 plus, yeah, I'll suppose that I'll take that on a down week. Titch, again, this is a pattern, goes bang, 140 type score, down a 70, 80 type score, bang a 140 odd, down to an 88. So I'm just expecting this from Titch. He's one of those players, if you own him, that you just don't get your hopes up about. And if he does go bang, I'm really treating it just as a real bonus. So, yeah, geez, it'd be really tempting as a luxury trade to get him out of the side. Who knows after the buys, if I've managed to complete my side and I've got maybe 5 or 6 trades left, it's a move that I'll probably look at even, or consider, I suppose. But yeah, really disappointed with him. Up, down, up, down. I will have the roller coaster on Titch in the stock market video this week. Zach Merritt, a 119, so beautiful. Anything, I suppose, a 115 plus, I'm happy with Zach Merritt. He's looking pretty happy at Essendon at the moment, which should be positive news for Don's fans, but he still hasn't signed. Yeah, I'm not too sure what's going to happen there, but for Spills, he's a good mate of mine. As you know, he's a mad Essendon fan. I suppose for his sake, I'm hoping that Merritt does sign on with the Dons, because they're looking really exciting as a team at the moment. But, yep, really happy to have him in my SuperCoach side after a really poor score of a 60-odd. Was it last week or the week before? Fife was really handy this week as my captain's loophole. Only had 2. It was him or R2. And I still wasn't sure if R2 was going to be the medical sub or not. So, took a bit of a gamble by not having an emergency basically this week, because I didn't have Poulter as my emergency. Ended up chucking Brayshaw in there to come on field in the last game. And I will talk about Brayshaw because he has lost a few CBAs, playing a bit more off a wing at times, which is a little bit concerning for me, because that's a big reason for his spike in average when he does get those big minutes in the middle. So an 81, he's owned by about 12% of sides, so still a relative pod. That's disappointing. If he had got a 120 plus type score, that could have got me close to the 2400 mark. But I'm not complaining this week, don't get me wrong. But yeah, look, with Bray, it's his role that is concerning me slightly. So, you look at a Mitchell as maybe one of those luxury upgrades. Brayshaw, maybe a similar type player. Because I would like to upgrade one of those two if I do have the luxury option, I suppose. Scotty didn't play. I hope that he doesn't play this week either, to be quite honest, because I want to trade him out the week after, but don't want to cop his price drop. So fingers crossed Scotty doesn't play. If he does, I've got a decision on my hands on what to do with him. But I'll sort of reassess that when the teams are announced. Poulter, didn't have him as an emergency, didn't have him on field. Ideally, I want to swap him into the forward line. I need at least one of these DPP mid-forwards into my forward line from my midfield. But look, he's tracking along really, really nicely, isn't he? Another 66 from him after some 70-odd type scores. Season average now of 69. So absolutely wrapped with him, and he should get to 300k almost on the dot if he continues to go around a 65 to a 70 by the time he's ready to trade out buys by. So he's been a fantastic pickup and one of those rookies that you can rely to have on field for a pretty nice score, I think. We'll go down now, check out the ruck. So Brody Grundy, I avoided this carnage. Many teams I know had Grundy as the captain this week, and to be honest, he was probably my fallback option as well. But what really did put me off that, and look, I didn't have to make that decision in the end because I did have Jack McRae as my vice, but what would have put me off that a little bit was the fact that there was a late change for Geelong and Stanley came into the side. So I thought with Grundy against Blitzarves and Asava, he should dominate, but with Stanley in, it's a little bit of a different situation. Not that I really rate Stanley as a ruck anyway, but yeah, so unfortunate for those that did captain him. As an owner, it's still a little bit scary as well because I'm not exactly sure how long he's going to be out for, if he will be out at all. I know the prognosis was pretty positive. It was a neck injury. They're worried about his nerves in there. I'm certainly far from a medical expert, so couldn't tell you much more apart from that, but I think the signs aren't too bad. So not sure if he plays this week, but I don't think he's going to be a trade-out option at this stage. Maxi, 120, so if you had a vice captain him, it's a really awkward type score. Do you take it? Do you not? I know that some people didn't take it and did captain Grundy, which would have been unfortunate, but if you had have stayed safe and taken that 120, you'd be pretty happy at the end of the day, I think. But yeah, Gawn is not giving us those massive scores that we saw earlier on in the season, and I think his ceiling is diminished as well, but I'll still take a 120 from Gawn. I'm okay with that, and clearly with Grundy, I think should be the number one and number two, although Nick Nat and Rob also had fantastic games as ruckman too. Flynn, 51, so this is a really poor score from him. We were hoping for an 80 plus at least type score to get him to about the 375, 380 mark. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Look, he doesn't play this week. Do you go a little bit early and trade him out this week? I know that Reeves was injured as well. Callum Coleman-Jones is an option that we've got. Only played one game, I think, or was it his second game? I think it was only one game, though, this year anyway. So decisions with what to do with Flynn. Do you hold him and get him to play through the buys? I'm not too sure. Haven't even checked out his break-even. It will be high-ish, I think. But, yeah, I'll just reassess. Another pick that I'll just reassess during the week anyway. Jack Zeeble there, a 104, so his ceiling's diminished a little bit as well. But again, if you have a forward that goes 100 plus, you just can't complain. So I look at Hall and Zeeble as a bit of a pairing. So I'm hoping between the two of them that I get about 220 points. And that was the case. So what I get, 225 between them as a pair this week. But Hall is still a pod, so only in about 4-5% of sides. He's just been absolutely fantastic for me. Gone 100 plus 3 weeks in a row for me as an owner. And again, a key reason, along with Dane Zorko, who I've had for 2 weeks, for me moving up in the rankings. So absolutely stoked with this pick. There was a stage, I think it was in the last quarter, maybe with about 10 minutes to go, where he was having his hammies rubbed down. And the commentator mentioned that he might be a little bit sore there, maybe just a bit precautionary that he wouldn't play any further part in the game, but in the end he did come back on. I think he was on about 105 points at this time, so probably got an extra 10, which was a bonus, maybe with some scaling. So was wrapped with that because you're so worried about his durability. But yeah, with that, he has a week off just like Zeeble, and that'll be ideal for a player like Hall. So I'm not in too much trouble with the buys this week, and he will cover for the really important buys in 13 and 14. So an ideal player to have in my side. Dusty, I know a few people did trade him in this week, so he'd be okay, I suppose, with a 95. He's not a player that we can rely on to go 100 plus, so 95 from Martin. He's a highly selected player. I'm okay with that because I just went with the crowd when I traded him in. I still really regret that. Traded him in at the wrong side at the wrong time. But I'm not complaining with a 95. Not looking back to his best by any stretch, but not a dog of a game from Martin, still just not using it too well. And Richmond as a side aren't absolutely flying. But okay with that pick. Impey, slightly concerned with, but again, a pretty popular player in regards to the teams that are ranked inside the top 1,000 anyway. I still think that he's a keeper, but similar to maybe a Mitchell, Brayshaw, he's maybe one of those players that you could upgrade as a bit of a luxury towards the end of the season if you're in that position. So for me, I'm still pretty happy with him. What is he? 92.8 for a season average. So again, when it comes to the forwards, he's still right up there. I think he's still top 8. So, yep, 62. You're disappointed, but lots of teams has him, what I said. And Hawthorn just had a pretty bad round. You know, players like CJ got a similar score, for example. Rowie, 54. Look, he's probably on the chopping block. I'm going to get another week or two out of him at this stage. Even next week, I think his break-even's at about 55, 56. So I still think that he can achieve that. But even if he gives you a 40 type score, which is lower than his season average and pretty low for what he's been doing in the last month, he's only going to go down, about 5 to 7k and go down to 300 again. So that won't be a disaster. He'll be able to cover for me for this round. But yeah, next week or certainly the week before his bye, he is Gonski for me, but really done his job for me, Rowie, and happy with him. R2, just been a terrible pick, probably my worst. Is he my worst trade in? He'd be pretty close to it. I've only got 1 week out of him, and then he's just been one of those players who I'm even scared to use as a loophole at times because he's named that emergency and he's been close to being the medical sub on a few occasions now. But yeah, I need to probably move him on during the buys, to be quite honest. If he's not named the week when North Melbourne plays, so what's that, round 13, I may even look to flip him, which isn't ideal. I bought him at about 170, made basically, 30 to 40k off him. No profit really whatsoever, but could be a dead rookie for me. Yeah, really disappointed with that. Waterman, 54, just okay. So with Rowe and Waterman, when it comes to the rookie roulette, I just broke even, 54. And this man, so this was the big decision for me this week. Do I go James Madden and have just enough money for Jack Macrae, or do I go Waitman and Jack Steele? So if I had have gone Waitman, Jack Steele, I'm still pretty happy because Steele absolutely smashed it out of the park. I was talking to Spills and I said, I've just got a feeling, I'm not just saying this because Steele smashed it, but I said, I've just got a feeling that Steele is absolutely going to go off this week. He'll go bananas. If I had him, he'd be my captaincy backup for this week, and that certainly was the case. Just a bit of gut feel. It was certainly weak opposition he was coming up against as well, and I thought that St Kilda and Jack Steele as well as a captain would really want to make a statement. Not that Jack Steele hasn't been raising the bat for his side during the last few weeks, but yeah, it was a choice between that combo, the Waitman-Steele combo, or the Macrae-Madden, and I went Macrae-Madden. I just went back at the numbers last week, watched the game again, or a few highlights at least, with Madden, and just really liked what I saw. I think he can play a little bit taller, he can play a little bit smaller, so like the fact that he can be more of a utility type. And 68, look, he scored more than Waitman. What's Waitman get, a 53, I think it might have been, maybe a little bit higher, certainly in the 50s, so I certainly won in regards to having him as a loop as well. I thought that I'll see how he goes. If he gets maybe a 60 plus type score, then I will loop R2. Worst case scenario, then I'll just get Waterman in his place. But he did really well with a 68, and yeah, really exciting type player for us. And I do think that he's going to keep his spot in the short term, which really at the end of the day is all that I need. So thank you very much, Jimmy. Love you, mate. Fantastic player. So actually, I lied before. I said that I only had Zorko as a Lions man, and I did bring Madden this week. So I do have 2 Lions boys on the side, which is absolutely fantastic for me. But anyway, that is the review or the team for this week. Now, how am I looking for the buys? Look, not too bad. If I get Hall out there, I bring Waterman in. And look, you don't know with the rookies if they're going to hold their spot or be playing. We're sort of guessing in a way with that. But I'll get Madden on, so I'm sort of 2 spots down there at the moment in my forward line. I'm hoping Grundy's okay, not too sure, but again, a couple of spots down. I can bring Brayshaw on for Titch, which would be great. And then Fife goes off for Poulter. So I'm all full there. in the defensive line. And look, I don't know if Highmore or Murphy are going to play, but let's hope that they do, and I'm all full in defence as well. So worst case scenario, I think that I'm probably maybe down to 18 if things don't go well. But yeah, that's all that you need, and I'm not too disappointed, and I'm not really aiming to have 20 plus plays in any of these buys. As long as I can get to 18, I think that I'll be going okay. So for this week anyway, yeah, looking pretty good. Now trades, I think that I'm going to go really, really boring, to be quite honest. Follow my rules and make 0 trades this week. I want to have 13 trades going into the week after, because I think rounds 13 and 14 are the really tricky buys, and I want to have a couple of sneaky moves up my sleeve. Now, the temptation this week is to maybe go early on a Bianco. That will be tempting, particularly if Scott does play. Reason being because I don't want to lose too much cash from Scotty, and I think if he does play, he's almost guaranteed to lose cash, and he'll start to plummet in the next couple. So that is certainly a temptation. The other temptation is to maybe go early on someone like a Coleman Jones. You've got Rowe there, who's getting closer to his break even, but again, I probably want to keep him up until his bye. You've got Reeves from Hawthorn. He had the injury symbol on him on Fan Footy, so not exactly sure what happened there, or if it's short term, if he'll be available. I don't even know what the injury is, so that'll be interesting. Here's another selection that we certainly can't go this week, but the week after for Flynn. That looked like a really obvious move, but we'll see what happens in regards to his injury. So there are a few things that you can look to do this week, but it's really awkward week to trade. I suppose that you can trade a couple of plays in order to prepare for next week as well, have some cash in the kitty, because if you look at my personal situation, I've got 7,300, which is next to nothing in there, so that does make things difficult for me in regards to upgrading. I certainly need to get downgrade in order to keep that upgrade cycle going, but I think this week for me, I may just keep it simple and not trade whatsoever. But look, plans can certainly change, and I may even, if I've got time, put out another video during the week on what I'm looking to do trade-wise, and maybe a bit more info and some strategy going into the buy. Remember, I did put out a video about the buys. I think it was early on in the season or even pre-season, so you can always go back and check that out. I think most of that info is still relevant, but I think that's pretty much it for this week, guys. The stock market video will be out hopefully on the Wednesday night. That's my aim as it is each week anyway, but we will see how we're going for time. Anyone in Melbourne, look, bad luck about the lockdown, guys. I am in Melbourne as well. I do get a few questions about that. Being a Brisbane Lions supporter, lots of people assume that I'm a Queensland boy, but I am born and bred in Victoria. Remember, I was an old Fitzroy fan, so I only started to follow Brisbane when they merged with Fitzroy. So, yeah, I am a Melbourne man. So I am living in the lockdown at the moment. So hope all is well with everyone in Australia and around the world, but particularly those people in Melbourne. You will notice I have gone with a bit of the Wolverine look as well. That's purely because having the mask on, just really itchy around the nose. So I just thought, I'm going to lose it. I'm remote teaching at the moment, so don't really need to spruce myself up too much, which is always handy. I never really do, as it is anyway. So on that note, guys, I will leave you there. Hope that you had an awesome round. If you didn't, it's all good. Head up, stay positive, because you can make a few moves during the buys and really start to improve your rank. But the way my team's going at the moment, I am pretty happy, but we'll see how we're looking in round 13, because it could be a little bit dicey at this stage. But take care, guys, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Cheers, bye.